Welcome to the StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void opening cinematic. No, before we actually begin, I want to get some sound tests going on really quick, because audio screwed upness, etc. I don't know how this is going to sound. So we're actually going to do something really quick here. We're going to play the prologue intro, which we've already seen. I need to know how it sounds, so I'm going to talk over it and use that as a variance to determine the proper audio value. So here we go. There's this thing called StarCraft, which by the way, I know. StarCraft 2 gets so much hate, and I don't care, because it's such an awesome game, and I love it to death. I am very, very hyped for this game that we're staring at, that will be coming out right now.
The final chapter of the StarCraft 2 storyline is coming soon with Legacy of the Void.
StarCraft 2 gets
but before it arrives, we have an exciting introduction in Whispers of Oblivion.
There we go.
This
Okay, so how's the audio?
Picks up where Heart of the Swarm left off.
I'm having trouble even hearing it, honestly, but how's it sound to you guys? How's the audio? Good, bad, high, low? Help me out. Help me out, guys. Here, I'll pause for a second. So, audio, we're good at audio? Because this, I've boosted it up quite a bit from what the DS was doing. No, Baronessa. Invalid reason, I'm afraid. Good audio, okay. So now we're going to do it for real. Again, this is my first time watching it. I'm going to go ahead and, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself for the first watch. Good restaurant, by the way. Here we go. I'm kind of excited.
The Swarm brought ruin to our world. Our proud people became refugees. And yet, they could not shatter our unity. For we are bound by the Kala, the sacred union of our every thought and emotion. Today, we retake our homeworld, and with it, our legacy.
Okay, I'm trying really, really hard not to spasm at how awesome that was. um, in the interest of total fairness and in deference to Javan, um, I don't care for the slowdown. I think they do a little bit too much of the slowdown with the StarCraft 2 cinematics. They've done that ever since Wings of Liberty, actually. Um, but oh god, that was awesome. Oh, November 10th, aka Fallout 4 can go wait. God. Okay. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, Nathrezim got there first, but the idea that so many different people, so many of these Protoss were willing to literally die for no other reason than to get a beachhead. That's literally what we just saw. That was them getting their first building on Aiur in however many years it's been since the evacuation of Aiur back in Brood War. In other words, God, that's just so cool that they actually started with what is effectively a gameplay mechanic shown in lore. That was why the Templars were so willing to sacrifice themselves there. Because remember, an Archon is basically doomed anyways. Simply by becoming an Archon, ignoring the fact that 2 people die to make it happen, that Archon will burn himself out very quickly. Um, So yeah, that's freaking awesome that they actually showed through gameplay mechanics the willingness to establish this beachhead and get back to Aiur and actually retake it. So and it shows very clearly the initial direction the storyline of Legacy of the Void is going to do. Um, the other thing I really liked about that is even though that was clearly exaggerated for the sake of the lore, I shouldn't even say that because that's actually the wrong way to see that. That's actually pretty much how I've always pictured several of those things actually working. If you don't know what I mean by that, StarCraft, all RTSs really, the units in game never function the way the units do in story. In other words, I mean, for God's sakes, the battle cruisers in StarCraft 1 are not actually all that strong. In fact, they're kind of weak unless you're microing the crap out of them. But in lore, those battle cruisers are death machines. You know what I mean? Huge, massive ships that could just crush, level an entire city, right? So I think what we just saw was a pretty good representation of exactly how strong a Zealot, a Templar, and an Archon, as well as a Ultralist, going on the subject, is in lore. In fact, one other wonderful, beautiful thing I just saw that I absolutely adored, it's a little bit before this, right about here. The destruction of the Archon actually removed a chunk of reality around it in what is effectively a perfect circle, or a perfect sphere, I should say. Um, and I think that's just so cool. And again, emphasizes the lore aspect of things, of what exactly an Archon is, the perfect combination of the 2 psionic forms with regards to the light aspect, or the Kala, if you prefer. I also love the amount of work they put into the background. Look in this one scene. You could tell those were Protoss buildings back there. But damn, that's just the amount of... I've always loved the Blizzard cinematic team. Literally going back to Warcraft 1. I've always loved the Blizzard cinematic team. They've basically always been at the cutting edge. And one of the reasons I love them is they put an insane amount of detail into what they do. And their directorial style is very stylistic. In other words, they don't just showcase something for the sake of looking pretty. It has a thematic significance. This is another example of this right here. Remember that one of the things they kept talking about was the unity. That is actually what their pseudo-mind link functions as. It's one of the reasons why the Dark Templar severing that chunk of them was such an incredibly a dramatic thing for them to do. That was so horrible that some Protoss would willingly separate themselves from the rest of their not quite collective. It's not like the Swarm where there's an overmind and anything like that. And it's not like the Borg. But Protoss can literally feel and have like a sense of the thoughts of those around him to make this kind of, well, like they said it themselves, unity, right? So we see here the way they interact, each Protoss working with the others in more or less perfect symmetry for all intents and purposes, really emphasizes that. And yet what's really awesome about that is if you've paid attention to the story at all at this point in time, you know the Protoss are not unified. They have basically never been unified. Not since the old days, and even then that's debatable. There have always been outliers, there's always been a Tassadar, there's always been people like the Dark Templar. Even amongst the new factions, the Protoss do not agree with each other and do not think in the same manners, in the same style. Yeah, it's like a mind meld that doesn't require physical connection. I think that's a really great way to explain that for anybody who doesn't know about the Kala and how that works. Adun was the one who basically came up with the way to really make the Kala work that way. It's actually more complicated than that, and I don't want to get too much into the lore of that now. I'm going to be talking a lot about the backstory of StarCraft when we actually get to StarCraft, because there's a lot, because it's a Blizzard game. Yeah, let's mute this for a second so we can showcase what I'm talking about here. I don't know if you saw that, but he, as he's moving, actually has the not this guy, not the Zealot. The Templar actually has the weird, yeah, that right there. Did you see that on the left? That's actually kind of how he looks when he's actually moving in game. Again, another wonderful example of the way they show the game in the story and vice versa. And yeah, the old Protoss had this whole caste system which was missed. Hell, the Protoss had a caste system up to and including Brood War. Well, at least just prior to Brood War. Geez, there's just this is really well done. This is Blizzard cinematic style in a nutshell. There's lots to dissect here. There's lots to look at. There's lots of meaning to be pulled forth. Notice the Zerg take a little while to get going, probably because they didn't know they were actually here. Mind you, these are mindless Zerg, and the Protoss realize that they have to take their time. Remember, they're buying time. That's the whole thing they're doing. So these two Protoss willingly turn themselves in. I need to unmute this for this one line, because that line's awesome. That's just, yes! And Archon, again, in lore, really should be just as insanely strong and powerful as this thing. Something that can actually take on an Ultralisk one-on-one and actually bring him down. Even though it took the destruction of the Archon to accomplish this, it still managed it. Oh God, I love that! The black hole thing. Because if you pay attention, a lot of Protoss technology is based around wormholes and the warping of space. So the idea that the Archon could actually literally, unintentionally cause one by its own destruction really gets that point across. Love that! This is just fantastic right here. First time we've seen a pylon in CGI. Looks gorgeous, by the way. And that enabling them to warp in the army of Zealots. Because that's exactly what they were doing. They were literally just sitting there waiting on hold, waiting for the ability to send them through. Now, again, another thing to really emphasize, and Samurai just got this across, this is random Zerg, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know, StarCraft, Diablo, and Warcraft do actually, yes it will, Benoth, do actually have a lot of similarities in storytelling style. Probably because they're made by the same frickin' people. I don't think that's a negative personally, as long as they're each done well, which I do. Moving on. The thing I really love about this is, you remember how there's this big lore point over in Warcraft about the fact that the Scourge, without a leader, will run amok and destroy everything? Now, that has two purposes. One is the fact that the Scourge have had the reins pulled in on them. In other words, the Scourge have not been able to go forth and actually wipe out the planet because he has deliberately not allowed them to. But the second point is, the idea here is that power, that strength of that army is so intense that everyone involved believes, and I am agree with this, that if the Scourge was fully unleashed, the world would be gone. We would be unable to withstand the full might of the Scourge. What we see here, this is a group of Zealots and Templar going full tilt, unleashing the significance of their power, and just getting destroyed, basically, by mindless Zerg. There is no tactical thought here. That's a probe, by the way, and also looks awesome. Setting the beacon for the pylon there. Anyways, this is just animals. There is no thought, no tactics, no strategy. There's literally nothing here to actually keep these Zerg significant in terms of combat. and yet these mindless beasts who aren't even interacting or coordinating with each other or being directed in any way still decimate this squad. Literally decimate, because there's one guy left at the end. Now, that is true what Nathrezim says. The old way the Zerg did was literally just overwhelm, 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 because they can do that. Power overwhelming. I'm sorry, I just love this scene. That is so cool! StarCraft 2's Archon design is just freaking amazing. Anyways, hi Mugwump. But yeah, and again, I also like the fact that this further emphasizes that the Zerg are, the Swarm, to be more accurate, is a large-scale threat and always has been. Too often, people have said that the Swarm isn't actually that strong, and a lot of that's been because of gameplay, because the Swarm in gameplay is, relatively or otherwise, equal to Terrans, which is equal to Protoss. In lore, the Swarm is this death machine, this horrible, just incredible force that can just overwhelm and crush basically anything in its path. But, of course, we don't really see that often, because that's only really emphasized in the backstory, in the books, in the comics, and, of course, in things like this. Now, oh, God, I love that backdrop. Just look in the distance there. Look at all that wonderful terrain you've got back there. Anyways, I do not think Mr. One-Eyed Zealot here is Phoenix, but it'd be awesome if he was. That would be so cool. I'm one of those people who really likes Phoenix, so, you know, that probably explains that to some extent or another. Now, I do think it is possible, and indeed likely, they're going to introduce a few new Protoss-style characters. I'm not sure what I think about that, because this is supposed to be, you know, Chapter 3, technically Chapter 5, but you get my point. This is something that we're supposed to be, you know, finishing this particular story arc. It has been stated that it is likely StarCraft will continue after Legacy of the Void, but Legacy of the Void is the end of the StarCraft story arc that started back in StarCraft 1. Ergo, you don't, speaking as a writer, speaking as a designer, you don't generally want to introduce new characters this far in. It's not really a great idea. Mass Effect 3, but it's not really the best idea to do that, because you're going to have so little time to establish them, and that's going to take away from time of resolving the other character arcs you've already got going. That being said, I don't recall learning anything about new characters other than the female Templar, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. Although she's already been introduced, but at the very least it is likely that she will have more character development in this. And I think that's it, actually, because we know that Zeratul is going to be present. Artanis is basically going to be the viewpoint character, similar to Raynor and Kerrigan from 1 and 2 respectively. So, yeah, she did die. You're right, Nathrezim. I forgot about that. She died sacrificing. So maybe she... No, I'm not talking about the one in the prologue. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the one that we saw in Wings of Liberty, whose name I do not recall right now, to be completely blunt. Selendis. That's her name. Thank you. I don't know if they're going to introduce any other new characters, like I said. I honestly think they shouldn't, unless those new characters aren't going to be well established, because their entire purpose is to be there for the next story arc after the Amon arc. Now that I'm okay with. That is good writing, but you have to make sure that those new characters definitely take the back seat to the main characters and don't receive nearly as much screen time. That's how you make that kind of thing work. Now there's one other thing I wanted to showcase here. Let's rewind a bit, go back to here, because I've already forgotten what it is. I was just, my mind was going a mile a minute when I was actually watching this here. Let's get some audio going back here. Okay, so first of all, God, that's gorgeous. But this is the other thing I wanted to say. I mentioned the Protoss structures and whatnot. Well, this could be a Protoss structure. I mean, it does certainly look like the design of what Protoss buildings would be, but I think this is the ruins of the Gantrathor. Look at it. Tell me you can't see the skeleton of a carrier right there. Oh, gotcha, true APM. Then yeah, I absolutely think that is very likely. Definitely. And again, probably someone who's going to be set up for a new thing. Anyways, so yeah, these could be buildings, stargates, whatever. But tell me you can't see the skeleton of the Gantrathor there. I mean, really, look at that. which I know they didn't have. This is Blizzard's cinematic style in a nutshell. They could have this anywhere on Aiur. They could. It doesn't matter. They could just make random Protoss buildings in the background, and it wouldn't matter. But they decided to do something that looks awesome, that really gets across the point of how sweet and awesome this is, thus having it be the Gatchathor. Now, of course, that is theory. I don't know if that's true.
Brought ruin to our world.
It is possible that's just a portal or a warp gate or God knows what else.
Proud people.
That is clearly a nexus up there. Also getting across the idea of just how large the nexuses are in things. The overlords, Benoth. Now, what Samurai points out is true. It is possible, whether it is the Gatchathor or that massive portal. You remember the one they left through at the very beginning, the very first mission of Brood War. The very first mission is getting to this massive portal to get off of Aiur and to Shakuras. I had to think about that for a moment. So one way or another, that is either, in my opinion, the Gatchathor's ruins or that portal, because both have significant impact on the story and exactly how that works. So
Refugees.
would also explain the Nexus being right there.
And yet, they could not shatter our unity.
Now, oh, hang on. Rewind just a second. This is another interesting point. This could be argued in several directions. Remember, the Protoss don't have much in the way of mundane travel. They rely on warp technology to get around the galaxy. It's one of the reasons their civilization fell so easily, because once their warp gates were screwed up, they had difficulty actually getting around, right? That's actually a part of their lore. So why are there only 2 Templars? Hang on, let me... Yeah, 2 Templars, 3 Zealots, and a probe. Why is this all they send here? Well, 2 possibilities that will come immediately to mind. Number 1, these 6 guys, literally got on a shuttle and went on the lengthy trip out here. A little flimsy. I think they would have actually sent more if they were going to do that. I like another idea better. I think these guys came through the portal, and the portal was only able to actually push forward this small of a group. I have no doubt that they wanted to send more through, and they were physically incapable of it, because you saw how screwed up that thing is. By the way, I've changed my mind. That's definitely the portal, not the Gatchathor. So this is just this dinky little force, and it's all they could get through. They probably actually had to specifically leave behind a soldier to get the scout through, right? However, of course, you know how Protoss technology is. Once they have access to pylons, and they warp in the army. You with me? The second option is a little more mundane. In other words, this is literally a scouting party that they sent through or took here in a shuttle to try and find a spot to set down the pylon. And once they get the pylon down, then they're good, right? However, what Bragwin says is my theory, and I really hope this is true. This is not the first scouting party. This is the last. They have been doing this for a while. They've been sending people to this spot, trying to get a foothold, a beachhead on Aiur for forever, for a long time. That basically, while all the events of Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm were happening, the majority of the primary core of Protoss people were sending through, units after units after units. Maybe they started with a large force and they got decimated, so then they decided to go and send a small force to try and not attract the swarm. Remember, this is not the tactically minded swarm. This is the swarm of mindless animals who is more likely to notice something big than something small. So they send, I could just picture, this is so Protoss. This is so hubris, because that's the Protoss in a nutshell. We are the superior beings of the galaxy and all that garbage that they like to pontificate on. Don't mistake me, I actually really like the Protoss. In fact, they are a fascinating culture, and I love a lot of their characters. But really, I could just see the Protoss saying, we will retake Aiur, fleet! And then the fleet is destroyed. And the swarm just crushes it like a bug. And so they're like, okay, well, Artanis does have a brain. So Artanis is like, guys, we need to send something a little bit less, and a little bit less. Okay, let's try sending in a scout force. Oh, nope, they're dead. And then a scout force. Oh, nope, they're dead, etc., etc. Until this group, and at this point, this is probably like standard makeup. 3 Zealots, 2 Templars, and a probe. Yeah, I could see that. And so this is like the 50th or whatever scout force that they have actually sent forward to make this beachhead. It just happens to be the first one that actually succeeded. Now, what Nathrazim points out is another possibility. It is entirely possible that this is a different perspective. This isn't a beachhead. They've already lost the beachhead. In other words, they had a beachhead thanks to Zeratul efforts and the events of both Brood War and just prior to, I guess, around the time of StarCraft 2. So they already had this beachhead, and the random roving swarm kind of crushed it, and these are the only survivors of that beachhead, desperately trying to reestablish a link with the main Protoss force back on Shakuras. All of these are great ideas. I don't know which one is true, but all of these are great, and I think that's what I love about this, because no matter how you look at this, this is fantastic. Fleet goes to IR, gets destroyed, higher survive commanders. Yeah, honestly, Nathrazim, that would be a good way to start it, I think. But yeah, so I like all of this. This is fantastic, and again, it all explains why there's only 5 guys in a probe. They're all that's left. They're the latest guy, you know, etc., etc. Now, oh, you guys are talking about Mass Effect 3. I'm like, what are you talking about with retconning? Granted, StarCraft 2 has done some retconning. It's also worth noting that this is actually the Zerg not at their greatest strength. I mean, these are Zerglings, a couple of Hydras, and 1 Ultralisk. This is not a Zerg army. These are Zerg scattered remnants, and they're still causing them this many issues, and again, either took out their base or took out all the other people who came here, depending on how you think of it. Some people have asked why the Swarm can overwhelm so easily, and this is true in lore especially. The Swarm can regenerate their numbers with ridiculous ease and speed. So imagine an army that you could have in real life, that you could replenish the forces of that army in a couple of years, or hell, a month, rather than having to actually wait, oh, I don't know, 30, 20 or so years to have new people be born, recruited, and then trained. You see the advantage that automatically gives the Swarm? I'm sorry, one more time. Sorry, just one more time. I have noticed one other thing in the background there, and I'm going to watch as we go through this section. No hints there. See, we actually see quite a bit of one of the structures that the Archon and the Ultralisk are fighting against here. And there's been a few good shots of it. I was trying to see if we could really see if that was the Gantrathor or the portal. Still not sure. It could really be either. Here, watch. If you go back a bit, right about to here. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you could tell. That's about a few hundred Zerglings in the background. You might not have even noticed that. Watch the background moving. Watch the hills moving. You see that? In the background, it's very hard to see, but wonderfully subtle touch there, which once again emphasized why 5 guys are having trouble establishing a beachhead, or indeed, anyone is establishing a beachhead. Yeah, seriously, Jovan, can you imagine Scourged Zerg? Because I can. Okay, you notice there on the right, that's the specific thing I wanted to point out. That's actually some kind of script or whatever. You see that? It's like some kind of... it's easier to see in motion, but I was trying to make sure you could be aware of what I'm pointing out. There's some kind of calligraphy, letters, painting, we're not sure which, because I don't speak Protoss. But again, that could either be the portal or the Gantrathor or indeed something else entirely. I just wanted to point it out because it does emphasize once again the fact that that was some kind of structure or Protoss thing other than just some random debris. Just pointing it out. Oh, hang on. I just saw something for the first time. Hang on. I really wish I was seeing this a little bit better. Okay, right there. You see what's behind the Archon? What the Archon is about to be smushed into? Hey, Brownian. Yeah, you probably did. Okay, so you see that golden thing that's kind of jutting into and simultaneously out of the building. If I could go forward like one more frame. Okay. There. God, it's really hard to get that exact thing. Yeah, it's a Protoss face, some kind of carving. Exactly. You can see the eye there. It's only there for like a freaking millisecond or two, and I'm having trouble actually getting that. But I think that is more indicative that this is in fact the portal. I can't actually imagine Protoss having decorums of their own faces on their carriers. Then again, what the hell do I know? But either way, nice little design thing back there. God, I love Blizzard style. Always have. Also, one thing, I don't know if you guys noticed this. This seems obvious compared to everything else I'm pointing out, but watch how the Ultralisk's claw there just goes straight through it. Watch this. Right there. Just carves straight through the building's wall. And look at how thick that is. That's a few feet of whatever incredible metal that's made of. That's not exactly insignificant. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's some statue of a Dune, or even Tassadar, but probably a Dune at this point in time, which has now been evaporated. Which, by the way, is wonderfully symbolic, if that's true. And that would be Blizzard style. They like to be really symbolic with their cinematics. See the Pandaria cinematic for like a textbook example of symbolism in a cinematic. So yeah, in fighting back to defeat the Zerg, a Dune has been erased from reality. There's Phoenix Jr., the only survivor. God. By the way, interesting note, obviously he has more pronounced scars and has lost the use of his left eye. But if you notice back here in the beginning, by the way, note they're standing there, so you know they don't warp in. That's also significant. Hang on. Notice, see that he's already got the scar, and his left eye is already having issues. So it's not like, so in other words, he was scarred before this fight. Another interesting point in favor of these are the remnants, these are the survivors of a beachhead, rather than these are actually the beachhead situation. Like, these are survivors of that fleet that we were talking about earlier, for example. So, and note, by the way, the scar goes across his armor, because Zerg. Yeah, sure, Nathrazim, hang on. Back here. Oh, you mean, I see what you mean, Nathrazim. You don't mean here. Or do you mean here? Is this, yeah, this is what you mean right here, right? So there's whatever that is back there. You can see some ruins that are just enough distinct that I think they're not part of whatever that building or structure is. On the left there, you see that? Those look like some kind of what used to be units, maybe reavers, maybe something like that. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. Yeah, let's see if there's another shot, because there was another shot of this later. I love that shot of the Nexus, by the way. That's gorgeous. And again, symbolic. The ruined Nexus being perched on by the Zerg. I mean, come on. A little... Blizzard likes to be a little obvious with their symbolism, but that doesn't bother me. Okay, yeah, looks like that's the... Well, no, there was another shot somewhere on. Hang on, where is it? It's further in somewhere. Right around here, maybe? One other small note, which I can point out really quick here, and I don't know if this is indicative towards one or the other, but look at the wall in the background right there. In the upper left, it's very obvious. You see the honeycomb design? Again, very Protoss. I don't know if that's actually indicative of if it's the gate or the Gantrathor or anything else. But yeah, that's the honeycomb design. If you watch the upper left there, it'll be obvious, even more so. And in the upper right now, you'll see a little bit of it as well. And once again, the Archon is still awesome. I swear there was another watching from the top scene, but apparently I'm on crack because I'm not finding it. Whatever, let's go back here. And yeah, I saw that too, Notherzim, and my first thought was that was, corpses, that this was the end of a battle. So let's pause like right here. See, the thing is, and the reason I automatically assumed it was the Gantrathor, is because there's so much in the back of it. Like, if you see the two primary arcs the ones in the front, the big old one on the left and the slightly bigger, slightly smaller one on the right, that looks like the Dark Portal. But then I look at the stuff behind it, and my thought is, what is that? That's why I thought this was actually the Gantrathor. It's like, what is, like, I don't know if I don't have the mouse showing. Hang on, let me turn on mouse sharing. Capture mouse cursor. There we go. There we go. Okay, so like this looks a lot like the Dark Portal, or the Dark Portal. Wow, wrong series. And this looks like the portal, but then there's like this spire and this thing right here, and this one right here. Now, obviously, it's ruins of some kind. I mean, duh, right? But as for which, not really sure about it. Here, let me move the chat over here so I can do this a little bit easier. And then the other thing that makes me wonder is this stuff right here. You see this stuff? Now, my first thought was this was some kind of temporary barricade, because it looks a lot like a makeshift wall, doesn't it? Except that doesn't make sense, because the troops, you can see them, they're right here. This is where the actual soldiers are, and this is actually where the pylon's going to be. So what's the point of this stuff, right? Now, And feel free to toss ideas out here, guys, because, I mean, I'm not trying to be definitive. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm just theorizing. And then, of course, here's the stuff on the left, which I already showcased right about there. There we go. All this stuff. Actually, now that I really think about it, now that I'm really looking at that, I'm not so sure that these aren't corpses. I mean, I know they look like rocks, but I mean, look at that, and this one over here, and this one. I mean, I don't know. That looks a lot. I mean, back here, too. There's a bunch of them right around here. Thank you, Baroness. Let's get a... Now, it is worth noting that this thing right here also looks very similar to what we just saw. Given that... Ooh, there's a theory. Hang on. No, that doesn't fit. See, I was going to say maybe this used to be a nexus, like right here, and these are the arms of the nexus, because this is very similar to the actual arm of the nexus we'll be seeing in a moment here. And yeah, this has to be the ruins of some kind of ship. It just looks too distinct and too separate from the rest of the building. You see what I mean by the similarity between the spires here on the nexus? There's one there, was one there, but again, that doesn't fit perfectly, or indeed all that well. All right, now we're gonna get. Oh, let me move the mouse a bit. Okay, I think those are corpses. You see this right here? And you can barely tell, but there's one that's kind of hidden by the smoke back here. There's something right here. Those look like bits and pieces of Zerg, actually. And... Ah, damn it. Hang on. And now we got the big slow-mo scene. Frickin' slow-mo. This is what I do. I look at the background of stuff all the time, because I'm a geek. That's true, Prog, it does. There we go. Whoop, whoop. Ah, stop being blurry. Ah! Okay, I'm not getting a good angle here, but if we rewind a bit, I want you to pay attention to something else here, okay? First of all, they make a circle around the probe. I just pointing out because that's super obvious what they're going for there. Yeah, probes actually have eyelids. I would do that. Yeah, that's kind of the direction I'm thinking in True APM. I was trying to pause it in this section. Okay, we'll just watch it. You see, watch the little bits of the corpses or whatever they are in the front. That looks a lot like the hollowed out armor of the whoever used to be here, either the people who died years ago or the people who died from the veiled beachhead, or the previous attempts to make a beachhead. In all three of our theories, that makes sense. That those are the armored corpses of other Protoss who fell here. Because the Zerg's corpses are a little more distinct from that. Also, okay, so there's the mountain of Zerg, but one other thing I wanted to point out, back around here, I want you to pay attention in the background. Hang on, Bragwin, you're connected to the internet, right? Because that's important. I mean, I only have to fill the map once per unlock. Okay, pay attention to the background. What I'm pointing out is again the the swarming the swarming Zerg. Just watch the background and how it moves, and you could see the numbers right about there. You see them moving in the background. You see how many Zerglings are swarming down the hill and whatnot. You only see it for like a second. Love that. Now, one other thing I'm curious about. By the way, I love the demonstration of the Protoss shield in effect right there. Notice how that Zealot's shield is gone, and that Zealot is now dead. That's where that Zealot died. Because remember, they had 3 Zealots. One was Phoenix Jr., and then 2 others. I think we already saw the first one die in the earlier section, so that's the second one. So now we're down to a Zealot and 2 Templars. And 1 injured Templar. God, this is so cool! I'm sorry, but this is just so cool! I know what you meant, Nothrazim. Right up against a dune. Yeah, this really is Debarkation Day or whatever. Debarkation Day for the Protoss. And there's Phoenix Jr., who at this point is literally the only survivor. Although, I was actually trying to see if we see the fate of the probe. Because I haven't seen the probe since it made the pylon. And it wouldn't surprise me if that probe is dead. Or as dead as a probe gets. Yeah, see, I don't see the probe. I think the probe was destroyed in the midst of that too. So literally, Phoenix Jr. was the only survivor of this initial launch. Or whatever is happening here. He was the only survivor. Oh, that would be so cool, the tracker. I've actually argued you can make a game like that. All you'd have to do is do one of 2 things. One, get rid of the base building. Completely remove that aspect of the gameplay. That has been done in RTSs. Dawn of War 2 did that, and basically had the units be about as strong as they are. I mean, you're leading a squad of like 4 guys in Dawn of War 2. And they just wreck face, especially if you know what you're doing with them. Another game, a much less known game back in the day, is Myst or Myth. I think it's Myth. I always get those 2 confused. Myth and Myth 2, Soulblighter, where again, there's no base building, you're leading individual units, and they're about as strong as they are in lore. But there's another way to do that. Go ahead and have base building, just actually make a mathematical equivalent of how powerful each unit is, and then vary the unit costs based on that. You could probably do this in the editor, actually. For example, have a carrier take such a stupidly, ludicrously amount of resources to build that by the time you build it, you've basically won. I know you can do this because there's a game out there that's done this. It's called Supreme Commander. Now, in that game, they actually had time as the unit of currency, effectively. So, by the time you get to the point where you can build the death machines, you have effectively enough resources that you don't have to think about it. It just takes a massive amount of time to make. However, in addendum to that, even those super awesome ships, the super death things that you can make are not actually invincible. It is possible to bring them down with tactics or strategy or a good unit setup. I think that would be great for StarCraft. I think that kind of a setup where you actually can build a carrier, one carrier, and it's just this insanely powerful thing that you really have to work at to bring down would be awesome. Anyone with me on that? Anyone? We need to do this. We need to make this in the setting, like, because you can literally do what I'm talking about in the map maker of StarCraft 2. You can alter the size of the carriers to be larger. In other words, as big as they basically are. You can alter their stats. You can alter their unit costs. We have access to everything we need to make this idea happen. Now, I don't really have the time to do that, if I'm being 100% blunt. But I'm challenging all of you right now. Make this happen. Make a lore-equivalent StarCraft custom map. And make it happen, damn it, because that would be freaking amazing. I used to actually do a lot of UMS maps back in StarCraft, the original, and Brood War, and I did a ton back in Warcraft 3. Actually, as I've shown off, I actually made music videos in Warcraft 3. And I've also done quite a few custom campaigns, more lore focused than anything else, in Warcraft 3. And I really wish I had time to work on that because I would totally get on this idea. That's a great idea. Whoever said that idea gets a plus in my mind. Who was that? Um, the Tracker. You get pluses for this. I also agree, by the way, for those of you who don't know the lore behind Immortals, uh, let's just say that the Immortals are zealots who already gave their lives in service of the cause and then kind of kept going, basically. So that would be pretty epic, too. But I can tell you exactly why they had zealots. By the way, this is, again, Blizzard's cinematic style in a nutshell. This is fantastic. You ready for this? Okay? Throughout this whole thing, you heard it, right? The whole thing. They not once gave the line you were expecting to hear, the line that was actually in the launch trailer, the launch teaser that came out several months ago. Never in this entire thing do they say, "My life for ire." And yet, that is always significant in terms of what we're seeing here. This is visual storytelling 101. What is it? What is it that they beam in at the end here? Hundreds and hundreds of zealots who are fighting at the cost of their lives for ire. So they don't have to say the line. They don't have to say "my life for ire." They could just have tons of zealots attacking to retake ire at the cost of their lives, and we get it. God, I love Blizzard's cinematic team. I always have. Oh, fangasm. One other thing I want to point out, just last thing, this is the last thing I got. Okay, we're about to watch here. I'm going to tell you what's about to happen. We're about to watch a zealot die. Now, what they do is they de-emphasize this. They have a zealot die in the background. And if I want you to watch, because we see his essence, his life, or kala, or whatever they actually call it, actually escapes his body into the sky, right? Okay, you watching this? It's going to be on the right side of the screen here in a moment. This zealot's going to charge the banelings and die to them. So watch what happens. He charges in, kills one of them, gets hit with full force with that one, kills the third one with his last breath. See it? Did you see it just there? It was just for a millisecond. His life escaping into the sky. Right here, watch this. Right there. And then his body falls, and then there's nothing left but the armor in the last millisecond. God, I love their cinematic style. I always have. Because they put so much thought into it. And again, I hate to bash FF13, but remember when I was doing the lore on FF13 on the marathon, I actually pointed out the cutscene that's like the exact opposite of this. It's pretty, but it's meaningless flash and drivel. There's no significance, there's no symbology, there's no nothing. It's just, this is pretty. By contrast, what they do here, what Blizzard has done for many, many years, is have significance and symbolism and thematic strength behind their cutscenes. Everything. This is why I like dissecting Blizzard cinematics like I'm doing right now. Because there's so much to talk about in a minute and a half. You know? Yeah, exactly, Samurai. That damn race scene. This is very flashy, just as flashy, I would argue, as the Squaresoft stuff, or Square Enix stuff, and way more significant. And yeah, Square used to do this exact style. They just haven't lately. Who knows? Maybe we'll see more of that in FF15. That would be awesome. I would love that. Maybe there's that in Type 0. I haven't watched Type 0, so I don't know. By the way, oh god, I just noticed something else. Dude, check it out. I just noticed one more thing. Yeah, I like that, by the way, True APM. The injured Templar had to willingly merge. They had to both be of one accord to create that perfect merger of the Archon. So I'm going to read what Nethersim said now. The Golden Armada launched its effort. A massive army landed outside the city and pummeled its way in, and then freaking died. Yep, we called it. Without even knowing about that, we totally called it. The Golden Armada, massive force of Protoss, comes in here and gets crushed. So we were right. These are not scouts of the beachhead. These are remnants of the beachhead. These are the last living members of that armada, barely surviving and barely enduring. Oh, I love it. Okay, so we were right. I love Blizzard's style because we could get all of this significance out of the cinematic without ever even reading that bit from the wiki like Nathrazim just did. Okay, so you see this right over here? Tell me this isn't a creep tumor. Tell me that's not what this is. I noticed there's a couple other bodies of these are clearly Zerg here because they're organic nature. But I mean, tell me that's not a creep tumor right there. I mean, look at that. And here we have Phoenix Jr. Okay, this. Oh, I never noticed that before. Dude, check this out. Check this out. God, I love this. Okay. So, am I right? Okay, I'm not as right as I thought I was, but we've got dead Zerg, dead Zerg, dead Zerg, and then we've got dead Protoss, possibly dead Protoss, and of course the ruins of the Protoss. Nice little obviousness here, by the way. Because in case you're not missing it, the whole point of the StarCraft story arc has been the creation and introduction of the hybrid, right? And the idea of the Zerg and the Protoss mixing about. You see where I'm going with this. Yeah, Notherzeem, exactly. Notice they're still beaming in zealots as they're charging, by the way. I don't know if you saw that the first time through. Yes! God, I am hyped! I am beyond hyped. I'm sorry, guys. This is how I get hyped for stuff. I see something and I dig into it and I'm like, yes, there's lots of meat here. You show me something without purpose or saying, you should get hyped for this, and that just doesn't work for me. That being said, I will say there's one thing that irritates the crap out of me about Blizzard, and that's the fact that right about the week whenever any of their games come out, their ads are everywhere. I can't get away from them. No matter what I look at, it's like, here, hey, Diablo, Reaper of Souls just came out. Reaper of Souls, Reaper of Souls, Reaper of Souls. And then, oh, hey, Warlords just came out. Warlords, 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 and so forth and so on. God, that's insane, Notherzeem. That is beautiful, though. They send the entire Golden Armada, and as Notherzeem pointed out, the mightiest force the Protoss currently have at their disposal, a huge fleet. And what we have as a resultant of that, the only survivors of that armada were 3 Zealots, 2 Templars, and a probe. God, that's amazing! And yeah, exactly. What track? I'm sorry, I didn't even point this out because I thought it was kind of obvious. But watch. Whoa, noise. Hang on. Kind of here. We'll turn it down to about half. So here's Phoenix Jr., right? And he sees the Zorg, and he knows he's dead. And remember, we now know this is literally the last survivor. Literally the last survivor of the Golden Armada. One guy's left. Phoenix Jr., nothing else, no one else. So what's he do? He gets up, he sees the swarm, he ignites his frickin' blades, because of course he does. Defiance! But then he notices that the portal is finally stabilizing, and he realizes, no. This isn't defiance. This is hope.
Today, we retake our homeworld.
Notice the completely different posture he's standing with at that second scene. Completely different than the first scene. Yes! God, yes! I'm sorry. I'm fangasming a bit. Yeah, and his eye opens just a little as he's like, oh, okay. Yeah, right? Right there. And so here he's got the defiant pose. I will bring you down. Notice how he relaxes his stance. You see that right there? He relaxes. And then he's standing like that in the second thing, like, okay, now we've got this. God, yes. Oh, yes, God. Sorry, some people out there have asked, Arsh, StarCraft 2 is crap. Why do you like it? To which I say, this. I have heard lots of people argue that StarCraft 2 has great gameplay and terrible story. And I obviously don't agree with that. I have heard many arguments. I have heard a lot of people who just whine and complain and don't give legitimate arguments. But I have heard legitimate grievances about StarCraft 2, and that's fine. I'm with it. I'm okay with that. But in my opinion, the level of depth and complexity they put on in so many of the storytelling elements, and the execution of StarCraft II's telly, there is show don't tell everywhere in StarCraft II's story. Basically every scene has at least some story significance crammed into it, whether it's theme or character or characterization or the significance of the setting or the advancement of the plot. Everywhere in StarCraft II there is some advancement of story, and it's almost always not done in dialogue. And so this right here, this is what I love about StarCraft II, and this is why I am so looking forward to replaying these games, all of them, by the way. For the lore run, and I am super hyped for Legacy of the Void. And again, as was pointed out, check this out. He starts off behind the pack and actually charges in front of his reinforcements to be the first zealot to engage the enemy. Because he did it. He was the only survivor of the Armada, and the whole Armada was sent to reclaim Ire, and that immediately fell apart. The whole Armada brought low by bugs and animals. And so after all that technology and all that hubris and all that power falling before the swarm, they had nothing left but the few remnants trying to do something they couldn't do before. Remember, the Armada was not sent to establish a beachhead. The Armada was sent to reclaim Ire, and the Armada fell. What was left was remnants who realized, and again, the Protoss aren't really that stupid. They do have some serious flaws in their culture. But they realize, okay, we have to establish a beachhead. We have to get people here. We have officially failed at reclaiming Ire. Now we have to start this process properly. With me? And so you can imagine as he's standing there, the last remnant of the Armada, barely, already damaged, already injured, and then the portal completes, and the pylon is there. They did it. Where the whole Armada failed, they succeeded. And now this horrible weight is lifted off of his burden. This horrible weight is gone from his shoulders, and he realizes, yes, now we can forward. Now we can function. Yes. And you might be like, well, why don't they stay behind to protect the portal? You don't get it. That's exactly what they're doing. They're warping in dozens, if not hundreds, of zealots specifically to distract the swarm, so the actual, more probes and leaders and whatnot can be warped in behind them to try and reclaim and actually get a base going and get some kind of beachhead going. God, I love this game already. I've pre-ordered this already, right? I'm pretty sure I have. Pretty sure I have already ordered this game. Hey, there's the Street Dane announcement. Yay. Okay, I'd love to keep jazzing about how awesome this is, but I want to save at least some of this for the StarCraft lore run. I am also literally shaking really, really badly from hunger. I haven't eaten today. So I'm going to go eat. I'm going to do all sorts of stuff that involves eating. There might be further eating in addition to eating. And then I am going to come back and we're going to finish up some Chrono Trigger Awesome. Hope you guys are looking forward to that. I hope you guys have enjoyed me dissecting this. How long was this? This is a 3-minute, 18-second trailer I've been talking about for 58 minutes and 23 seconds. Yeah. God, I am so hyped. I'll see you guys later.